Hey, greetings, everyone. Lieutenant Colonel Alan West here, and welcome to the Steadfast and Loyal program.
You gotta light 'em up before they burn it down. Better dig deep and put 'em in the ground. Blood on their hands, they're hellbound. Save us all. Ooh, they're gonna burn it down. Save us all before they burn it down.
As I sit here talking to you, we are 48 hours away from a very, very important election cycle for the future and legacy of the longest running constitutional republic that the world has ever known. I know that some people on MSNBC, CNN will say that, oh, you said constitutional republic, you're an extremist. You believe in natural rights theory, this whole thing about the creator God endowing us with the rights of life, liberty, and property. John Locke, 1689, Second Treatise of Government. But that's who we are. And this whole argument about threats to democracy and all of these type of things, I kind of find it funny when you talk about threats to democracy, but yet you want illegals to be able to vote. The Biden-Harris Department of Justice bringing a lawsuit against a sovereign state, one of the most important fundamental sovereign states that we have, one of the original 13 colonies, the Commonwealth of Virginia, for clearing off non-citizens from its voter rolls. Why would the Biden-Harris administration, Department of Justice, want non-citizens to vote? Not support the SAVE Act? I don't know. Help me out with that. But in this final week, we have heard, seen, whatever you want to call it, the two respective presidential candidates come out and give their quote unquote final argument. I don't think there's really any argument there. But what I want to do is talk about this from just issues. I know that we've had record number of turnout in early voting, but there are probably still some of you out there that are waiting till the last minute, waiting till election day to cast your ballot. And so I just want to close out this election cycle giving you the thoughts, perspectives, and insights from the old colonel. You don't have to agree or disagree. As a matter of fact, I found it very funny that, we have our little neighborhood group chat. I live over in the Eastern Hills area of Garland, Texas. And one of our neighbors is from the other side of the political perspective when it comes to the rest of the neighbors there. And they kind of interjected themselves, and I just had a simple exchange with them, talking about issues. I can't vote for a fascist. Well, a fascist is a person that shuts down free speech and, the expression of individual rights. And as far as I know, Mark Zuckerberg came out and said that the Biden-Harris administration was colluding with them to prevent the freedom of speech and freedom of expression of American citizens, wanting them to shut down because they didn't want any challenge to them, disinformation, misinformation about COVID. Kamala Harris recently came out and said that there are no religious exemptions when it comes to our desire to dismember babies all the way up until the time of birth and even afterwards, if you understand the law in Minnesota, where 5 babies have been left to die after surviving that heinous procedure, which is what the former Democrat governor of Virginia, Ralph Northam, said. We just set it off to the side and decide what to do with it. Let's call infanticide. But your very first liberty that you have in your Bill of Rights, the United States Constitution, the freedom of religion and free exercise thereof, Kamala Harris says, that doesn't matter. So I think that it's important that we look at this not based upon personality. If you hate Donald Trump, you have every right to be able to hate Donald Trump. But don't hate your country. don't try to pass off talking points as facts. As a matter of fact, Democrat New York Senator Daniel Patrick Moynihan once said that you're entitled to your own opinions, but not your own facts. And I think the facts speak very clear. But one of the first things I want to talk about when we look at these final 48 hours, it was last week Sunday, because this program, broadcasts 9 o'clock on Sunday morning. So I was at church, but I saw this when I got out of church. Vice President Kamala Harris shows up at a church. Now, understand the hypocrisy of this. Here is Vice President Kamala Harris, who the previous week was, I believe, in Wisconsin at a rally, and someone stood up and said, Christ is King, Jesus is the Lord. And she said, you're at the wrong rally. In other words, get out of here. That's that secular humanist perspective that, we ain't got no time for Jesus Christ and, God and all that type of stuff, which, if I recall, back in, I think it was 2012 at the Democrat National Convention in Charlotte, North Carolina, where they actually booed and voted down having God in the platform of the Democrat Party. That was 2012. That's 12 years ago. So this is a consistent thing. So now the person who said that you're at the wrong rally when you shout out Jesus is Lord, God is King, you got to get out of here. And the person was escorted out. Go down the street to a different rally. Now she shows up in the pulpit of a church in Philadelphia. And what is so funny to me is that all of a sudden she gets this Southern black preacher accent. And she starts to quote out of Psalms, where it talks about how, joy cometh in the morning. She gets that iambic pentameter rhythmic speech that we all know from pastors, yeah. It was just hilarious. So you go from telling someone that professes Jesus is Lord to get out of your rally, then all of a sudden you're standing in a pulpit and you got this rhythmic preacher speak with a Southern accent on top of that. And you're from California and you're speaking in Philadelphia. It reminded me of when Hillary Clinton went into a black church, and the church that Kamala Harris went to was a black church. But Hillary Clinton goes into a black church, and all of a sudden she gets a Southern black accent. I don't feels no ways tied. I've comes too far from where I started. If I had ever spoke like that in front of my mom and dad, they would have beat me down. Boy, that's bad English. But how condescending and offensive these folks show up in black churches, and like Joe Biden back in 2012, they're going to put y'all back in chains. This is laughable, but it also shows a desperation. And so here Kamala Harris was last week, Sunday, at this black church in Philadelphia, and she starts talking about how God, it's God's will. It's God's will. She starts to compare herself to the Apostle Paul. And it's God's will that they should vote for her. Now, I got to tell you something. We got so many pastors out there. Brother, I can't talk about this politicking thing, because I don't want to lose my 501c3 status. How many times do we have to have these candidates, always on the Democrat side? John Kerry did the same thing when he was running for president. Show up in black churches especially and start with this iambic pentameter rhythmic speech, quoting scripture and all this type of stuff. We know it's disingenuous, but no one shouts and yells separation of the church and state then. Which, oh, by the way, if you really read and understand the letter that Thomas Jefferson wrote to the Danbury Baptist Convention of Connecticut, it was not anything to do with preachers and pastors not being able to speak about the Bible, values, principles, things of that nature. What Thomas Jefferson wanted to express was that he did not want to see a head of state become the head of church, which is what the example was of King Henry VIII. But the progressive socialist left has been so good, the secular humanist has been so good in scaring the you-know-what, bejesus, out of pastors that they think that they can't talk about these things. Oh, that's bad juju. But yet we can have someone running for president get up in a pulpit and start, going Southern black preacher talk that's from California, and that's okay. And saying that, I'm standing in this pulpit telling you that God is willing and God think it's right that you vote for me. And pastors are scared to talk about these issues. And boy, let me tell you something. These pastors that are allowing someone like this to step up into their pulpit, someone that believes that, you should dismember a baby in the womb all the way up to the time of birth. That's what she believes in. Deuteronomy 30:19 talks about the blessing and the curse, life and death. Choose life so that you and your descendants shall live. In the Psalms, 127, 3-5, it talks about children are a blessing from God. Blessed are the ones who have many of them. The man who has many of them is like arrows in the quiver. Jeremiah 1:5 talks about I knew you before I formed you in the womb. I mean, what are these pastors thinking? I mean, I thought we were made in the image of God, but yet Kamala Harris believes that taxpayers should pay that you can remake yourself in whatever image that you want. That's fact. So this whole separation of church and state thing, I mean, why is it that the left gets a pass on it? But, we have pastors that say we can't talk about these things. But yet someone can go into the pulpit and do this after they have said that you're at the wrong rally when you shout that Jesus Lord. And oh, by the way, there was a person at that church in Philadelphia that shouted out blaspheme. They're absolutely right. And right on cue, of course, the choir starts playing music and everything to drown that person out. And that person was escorted out. And Kamala's standing up there clapping, "Yay, this is why we have democracy, so we can have freedom of speech, blah, blah, blah." Then why did you have the lady escorted out if you believe in freedom of speech? Who's the real fascist? So I just want to say that as we go into the final throes of this election cycle, listen to what people are saying. Don't just get caught up in the whole personality thing. Joy. Joy doth cometh in the morning. Jesus is joy. Not what we see happening from this political candidate. Lieutenant Colonel Alan West here on the Steadfast and Loyal program. We'll be right back. Greetings, I'm Lieutenant Colonel Alan West. In my career from the battlefield to Congress, honor and integrity have always been my compass. When it comes to building a precious metals portfolio for my family, I choose United Patriot Coin. Their commitment to honesty and transparency aligns with everything I stand for. They care about our great country and focus on serving patriots from all walks of life. They've teamed up with veterans of the precious metals market to create a new kind of gold dealer designed to serve the needs of a new type of gold buyer. And that's why I know I can trust them when it comes time to buy my gold and silver. If you value honesty and reliability as I do, then join me. Hey, welcome back to Steadfast and Loyal program. Colonel Alan West here. We're talking about this whole thing about closing arguments. And really, again, I don't think there should be any argument. I think it's pretty, straightforward and clear, the delineation between the two respective candidates for president and all the races downstream of them. And please make sure when you go out to vote the entire ballot. Just don't go in click the top of the ticket and walk out. There are people all the way down to, here locally, county commission, some other type of races. They need your electoral support as well. So it's important that you do that. And some have propositions out there that you need to study and understand and vote for those propositions because that's very important. At the federal level and the state level, we have constitutions. At the local level, you have charters. And, in the city of Dallas, their charter review is only every 10 years. And there are some charter amendments that you need to go out and study and understand, especially the last three charter amendments, which are S, T, and U, which were placed on the ballot because of citizen petitions that talk about responsibility and accountability of the city government, the city council, the city manager to the people. And then also making sure that we have the right amount of police to protect people. So please make sure that you're going out there and be an informed and educated voter. There are some people that don't want informed and educated voters. They just want people to show up and vote emotionalism. They want people to show up and vote because, I saw a commercial ad. Again, and again. But please study and understand these issues. This past week I had the opportunity to be on a national panel, Tuesday evening, as a matter of fact, national panel of black men. Because all of a sudden, this really big issue about black men not voting how Barack Obama says you should vote. I'm going to come down here and chastise you. And you better be glad that, I don't want to have to sick Michelle on you. Really? That just shows how, again, the desperation of the left, that they're coming down and telling you that if you're a black man, you have to vote their way based upon one thing, the color of your skin. Now, I grew up in the neighborhood in Atlanta, Georgia that produced Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. He talked about the content of character, not the color of the skin. But I guess when it comes to holding political power, the left could care less about character. They could care less about the issues. All they care about is the color of your skin. So coming down and telling me, by the way, I don't even know if the left thinks I'm black. Because Joe Biden said 4 years ago that, if you don't know that you should vote for me, you ain't black. So what am I, Joe Biden? They're going to put y'all back in chains. But this is very interesting in that you've got Barack Obama and all these people hammering black men to basically say, you can't think for yourself. Dadgummit, I'm coming down here and I'm telling you how you need to vote. I'm telling you that if you don't vote for Kamala Harris, it's because you brothers got a problem with a woman. I ain't got a problem with a woman. I'm the son of a mom. I've been married to a woman for 35 years. I got 2 daughters. I don't have problems with women. I do have problems with incompetence. I do have problems with policies and principles and values that don't align with my own. And I do have a problem with someone that believes that I don't have the freedom to be able to express my policies, principles, and values through my electoral patronage. That's called fascism. When you're trying to suppress my free will to select who I believe should be in any elected position, that's why we have voting. But sitting on that panel, it was a lot of emotionalism. It was like, it's all about Trump. Well, to me, having served 22 years in the United States military, coming from a family that has served this country in uniform from World War II to the present, only missing 2 combat operations, Operations Just Cause, which was Panama and the Korean War. I'm looking at things that relate to our security. I'm looking at our foreign policy, and I don't recall all of these conflicts and hotspots, especially in the Middle East, during the Trump administration. As far as I remember, during the Trump administration, he was the first president that said, yeah, we're going to move the American embassy from Tel Aviv to the rightful capital of Israel, which is Jerusalem. Oh, and you had Mahmoud Abbas and Fatah and everybody, all the Islamic jihadists screaming and yelling, there'll be blood in the streets. There was nothing. and the embassy was moved. I recall President Trump getting people to sit down at a table and sign something called the Abraham Accords, bringing peace to the Middle East. I remember Iran, the number one state sponsor of Islamic terrorism in the world, being virtually bankrupt because Donald Trump put his boot on their neck when it came to them being able to export their energy resources. You didn't have any of that. Put sanctions on them. They had teeth. We didn't hear about Hamas and Houthis and Hezbollah and Islamic Jihad. We didn't hear about any of this stuff. There was no attack by Hamas going into a cross border of a sovereign nation and killing its people to the tunes of some 2,000 or more. Largest killing of Jews since the Holocaust. None of that happened. And why? I mean, I kind of like that foreign policy, a foreign policy of strength. Ronald Reagan talked about peace through strength. Ronald Reagan believed that if we had a credible military deterrent, and the same thing that Donald Trump believed. But when you display weakness, this is what you get. There was no invasion of Ukraine during the Trump administration. China was not rattling its sabers toward Taiwan. Little rocket man Kim Jong-un was pretty quiet. Now we got North Korea sending troops to Russia to support them in their endeavors in Ukraine. We've got Iran that is shipping their drones to Russia to support them in Ukraine. We've got the BRICS. It is Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, and a few other countries that just recently met in Russia to try to undermine the American dollar as the currency of record for the world. And oh, by the way, Russia, China, Iran signing cooperation agreements. That's what has happened in the last 3.5 years. And when you look at our national security, the fact that we don't have the capability and capacity of a military that is a credible deterrent. Everyone knows that. China is surpassing our Navy as far as surface warships. I just recently read a report that now all of a sudden China has a helicopter very similar to the AH-64 Apache helicopter. I wonder if it has anything to do with leaving $80 billion of U.S. equipment over in Afghanistan. And there is a small little teeny tiny part of the Afghan border that connects to China. And there's a lot of raw materials that China is now in Afghanistan exploiting. And if you don't know about China's global intentions, just read the Belt Road strategy that they have for their not just regional Pacific hegemonic dominance, but a global hegemonic dominance. So let's think about these things when you're going to vote here in 48 hours. The world is not a safer place. Our military has been lacking in its recruiting and retention goals just in this past Biden-Harris administration. And I'm a product of the all-volunteer military, which in my 22 years, we came close to it, but we always met our recruiting and retention goals. We always had a strong military force, even when you had Bill Clinton, conducting a RIF and all of these type of things post Desert Shield, Desert Storm, because, we lost a focus strategically. But I want you to look at that. The foreign policy situation, the national security situation of the United States of America, our standing in the world, the debacle in Afghanistan, the 13 who lost their lives unnecessarily there at Hamid Karzai International Airport, the billions of dollars of equipment that was left behind that is being exploited by our number one geopolitical foe. The fact that we don't have the capability and capacity that we used to have in our military. But, they're pretty good at DEI, CRT, gender dysphoria, all this other ideological agenda items of the left. But we're not that capable force anymore. A force for good, a force for peace. So as you're preparing, if you have not voted to this point in early voting, and here in the state of Texas, early voting ended on Friday evening. So Saturday, Sunday, Monday. Now, if you have not voted, what are you going to do on Monday? On Tuesday, I'm sorry. November the 5th. Are you going to vote for a stronger foreign policy? Are you going to vote for a national security policy that means that the United States of America is respected and regarded and that our allies can trust us? Kamala Harris says that she has been involved in all of the major policy decisions of this Biden-Harris administration. She says that she was the last person in the room with President Joe Biden when the decision about the Afghan debacle was made. And on The View, she sat there and she said, when she was asked, is there anything in these past 3.5, 4 years that you would do different? No regrets. That's what she said. So she doesn't regret any of the things that we have seen happen with our foreign policy and national security. You should think about that as you're going to the polls here in 48 hours. Do you want a strong America? Do you want to restore our military capability and capacity? Do you want a strong foreign policy? Kamala Harris says that she went to Ukraine and spoke and gave her support to Vladimir Zelensky, and then 72 hours later, Russia attacked. Shows you the regard that Xi Jinping, Vladimir Putin, the Ayatollahs, Kim Jong-un has for this individual that says she wants to be commander-in-chief. Lieutenant Colonel Alan West, the Steadfast Law Program. We'll be right back.